Welcome back. This is K24 this morning. We're looking at the big stories, of course, right here. Talking about the COVID-19 economic recovery plan. How do you do that both at a national and county level to try and just kickstart this economy and move it forward after, the blow that has been dealt due to COVID-19 in the year 2020. We have a question of the day as well, putting it up on screen because they will be needed money to do this. Are you confident in the manner the government is handling the national debt as far as that's concerned? Are you confident in the manner the government is handling its national debt? We'd like to hear from you. Send us a WhatsApp message or tweet me at I am Jeff Mote or at K24 TV. We have a message. Let's look at that very quickly. It's really intimidating to see the government mishandle the situation in our country. The corruption situation. This is what is making the debt to seem to be mismanageable. Even the biggest economies don't lack debts. They only apply financial prudence in the allocation of their monies to the relevant priorities. For Kenya, having over 7 trillion shilling debt shouldn't hold water. What's imperatively important is how prudently those entrusted with our monies are making sure that the debts are giving us value for money from the projects being done, and most importantly, having the right people in the relevant offices. The Ndindi Nyoro bill to introduce capital punishment to the corrupt ought to be reintroduced in Parliament. Okay, they should be caned. That's Jenga Okongo from Kihara. Keep those messages coming in. You can get me, of course, as well on Twitter at I am Jeff Mote. Very quickly, let me look at what's happening on Twitter. Ricky Jones saying, shida ya Kenya ni kila mtu akona madeni from the government to the mama mboga. Who will help who? Okay. Harrison Oshira, right now we can see the big problem is that no one is focusing on this particular issue. The politicians all are singing the BBI song. Kenyans have been left to themselves and God. Hashtag K24 this morning. Keep them coming in. We'll be looking at that right here on the show. At this particular point in time, Edward, Treasury sent out their budget review and outlook paper. And from the look of things, by the time they have finished Uhuru's term, they'd roughly be borrowing around 2 billion shillings per day just to make sure things work. And some people are sitting and say, okay, fine. We've spoken about our ambition and what we want to do. But is it possible to cut our cloth according to what we need for our coat? Because clearly, you don't have to build the SGR and do all these mega projects at the same time. Do one thing, leave that as your legacy, and move on. What's your take on that particular scenario?
I think it's the structure, and in terms of systems thinking, we look at basically what is the foundation that is holding any kind of project. And for me, the question goes back to when Treasury was trying to design this Jubilee administration and look at the numbers. From an actuarial perspective, were all these projects viable, or were they just politically, populist projects? And that's the challenge. When you fund politically populist projects, is that you're going with the masses and you forget about the reality on the ground. And so while all governments across the world will borrow, the question is to match what ambition? Have we matched our ambition? Our production capacity is very squeezed. We have a top-heavy government and a very bottom low and schemed and narrow base. Why? Because our production capacity has not yet sophisticated so much to match all these projects. And so what happens? We're having a weight down, and the building is cracking, and we are just feeling the cracks coming in. It's just about to crumble and crash down. While all these projects wanted to be finished at a particular time, they are not effective, they're not ambitious, because one, you have to plan for what you're able to finish within a term. Two, you also have to plan for contingencies. COVID is a contingency. At this moment, we're not supposed to be saying, oh, we were not anticipating. We could see the trends, when China was going down. We could see that. We had to readjust for a while to have adaptations. But going forward, the question will be, are we doing these projects for someone's legacy, or are we doing it for Kenya's benefit? And so some of these things require a lot of introspection, again, to see. Like, for example, right now, the health crisis is a major issue. There has to be some form of rhythm, alignment within the planning processes, and to see whether even our tax collection base is able to revive to at least a considerable pace by next year, June. Because after June next year, you're going towards an election budget.
Right.
Do we have the capacity to manage that? If this election is coming with what is being talked about in the referendum, it means you're going to have major expenditure. Meaning, whatever you have right now will spill over to almost 2023. The next administration will have to do almost 75% less in terms of the revenue they will come and have when they're starting their ambition. So whatever they will be telling you in their manifesto in 2022, forget it. There will be no money to fund it, literally, you know.
And let's talk about the money as well, because some people are talking about KRA taxing everything short of, you know, the breath that they breathe, Gabi. Starting at a point where we had some relief because of COVID-19, some tax relief, but KRA has come out clearly on this, that come 2021, VAT goes back to its normal rate and all the relief that you got goes back. However, the context in which this relief was given hasn't really changed. Businesses are still shut.
Of course.
Layoffs are still up through the roof. And some people are wondering, okay, fine, KRA has not usually met their targets.
Yes.
But you can't tax your way into a business that has no money. If I'm not making any revenue, even at 50% tax, you still won't get the money.
Jeff, indeed, globally, that's the trend. You cannot tax a company that's not making money, or you cannot tax even anyone who's not making money. Now, the tax break, people may not actually be able to understand it much, but bigger corporations will actually feel that need. And how they'll spend that money, my hope is that they'll be able to transfer the very same cuts that they get to their employees. In fact, that's the mindset of, you know, giving companies and individuals a tax reprieve. It may not be much from what me and you are saying, but with bigger corporations that, you know, big corporations like Safaricom, when you give them such a reprieve, they'll be able to give something, you know, like kidogos to most of their employees. Jeff, let's still go back to this issue about debt. I'm a firm believer of growing an economy through borrowing that is very professionally utilized. For instance, when we talk about SGR, most people did not see the need for SGR. But what it has solved, it has actually solved a very huge part of our commerce. People may not see it now, but the efficiency brought about, or that can be built from the port to the interior and to outside Kenya, right, can be realized if you are to follow it, you know, strategically, and you follow it plainly. You will understand the commerce behind it. When we build roads, Jeff, it's not for the government really to start asking for a profit when they build roads. These are key economic enablers whereby Jeff, when he buys a matatu, that matatu is not breaking every minute because of potholes and bad roads. That Jeff will be able to get money where throughout he'll be able to sort out his debts, pay the bank where he's borrowed, and keep the economy going. More than that, if you are using that particular road, you are able to transport your fresh produce without your pickup every time. You going back to this river road here, buying sijui, you're buying your part of the engine that got broke, you are fixing your car every time. And by the way, these spare parts are actually coming from abroad, whereby you're going to spend your hard-earned cash. So in real sense, when that road is not fixed, you are also not making a profit. So when you have a road that is fixed, it gives me and you and somebody else the ability to get into business and have an element of efficiency.
Gabi,
that's what you should look at.
I want to jump in there because I get it, but usually the question is, in principle, it is good to have a railway line that goes from the port all the way inside, to have an expressway that's done. But the question is, at what cost? You know, because some people sit down and like, yes, SGR is a good idea.
Yes.
But when it's that expensive, really, did we have to do that? Or could we have used this money,
Jeff, there's something I want
as they said, in a more prudent manner?
There's something I want to introduce to us. There's something called delayed gratification. Somebody had to do it. It needed to be done. So the timing, or when it is done, really should not be the concern. The concern should be, are we able to utilize that infrastructure and make sure we capitalize on it so much that we are able to pay that debt? That should be it. All right? And if we are able to make money coming from this expressway that you're talking about, if it's going to be at all road, are we going to have enough traffic to realize the very fact that we can pay this debt? All right? So when you're doing the feasibility study, these are some of the things that should come out. Or better yet, are we able, when we build this infrastructure, is it going to help us export more? All right? Are we in a position to be able to service our debt as we build our infrastructure and build our economy. These are the things we should be talking about. The key major problem that we have is corruption, like somebody has said. That to me is the poisoned chalice. To me, that is the challenge that we have year in, year out. Because since the 80s, we have not had what you call a trajectory in development. And that's why we lag behind. That's why we've lagged behind. Many countries are doing these uptakes, Jeff. Go to Rwanda, they are doing the very same thing. Go to Ethiopia, they are doing the very same thing. But if you look at the standard of corruption in those two countries, it's a little bit lower. So, can we be in a position to say, as a country, we are going to look around the possibility of us continuing to look around great ways to, whether it's pushing our coffee more. I think, reading the dailies today, I think we've done well, better in coffee and tea than we did in last quarter. Are we able to continue doing this? Are we able to revive our sugar industry? Are we able to revive our local and domestic industries? Are we able to reach out to the region and do a lot of trade and commerce? This is what we should be gearing towards.
Let me get Edward in on this one, because he hasn't joined on this one.
The major problem which I think we have as a country, and this is why I think we need to be banning the midnight oil thinking, is how do we produce more? Anything else, Jeff, we cannot survive by that equation.
Well, Edward, we're talking about how we produce more, but some people are saying, okay, fine, we have the SGR, we come to the expressway that is right now one of the most expensive roads built in the world, and you sit and ask yourself, as an economy, again, in principle, great idea to have this country connected, but again, at what cost? Is that what do you need the car before you as
Exactly.
you still rent in your house?
Exactly, that's what I wanted to challenge Gabby on, in terms of, would we have been better placed to develop the sophistication in our production before we can actually move out? Because this one looks like more or less we've put, the cart before the horse, in terms of, in principle, the X amount that we've spent on SGR at construction, at kickbacks, and, at servicing it, vis-a-vis our production capacity. Because the question I'll be asking Gabby is, how much is going back to the ports? Not how much is coming from the ports. How much is going to the ports with all those outward bound SGR that are going back to the ports, and they're going to dock at the harbor and going out of the seas? If we don't have anything going out that is of substantial nature, or even at 25%, and this one is why we need to have clear numbers of these costings of all these big projects, whether it's dams, whether it's the roads, whether it's all this transport infrastructure. We need to look, are we making even at least 10 to 15% of the net investment in that? Otherwise, if our sugar is still being consumed locally, our tea is just going by flight, our flowers are going by flight, then we should have now invested more in terms of the air industry, the hub, the cargo. We would have put more money there. However, his point in terms of convenience is notable. But we have to ask ourselves, at this point in our economy, is the biggest producers of our products, in terms of our economic drivers, keen on convenience? Because that turnaround is supposed to be calculated into some ripple effects in terms of other people who are under other economies which plug into that convenience and are able to load and distribute. So you go back to say, he's talked about the Rwanda, he's talked about Ethiopia, but how much were they doing it per cost per kilometer? And I'm sure he knows the mathematics there. Cost per kilometer, including kickbacks, is something we need to be able to really...
Jeff, let me tell you, you see the economic... You see, sometimes I think we do ourselves a major disservice. You see, we cannot compare the development or the cost per kilometer that he's talking about in a place like Rwanda, in a place like Tanzania, in a place like Ethiopia. Mainly because the highest cost that we get in Kenya is land.
Yes.
In those countries, land is literally owned by the government. You get? So you just look at the mess that we had with the Swazuri team in a place called Kerarapon, and you will realize what I'm talking about. All right? So corruption, I still maintain, corruption is the cancer. That is the giant. That is the giant that we need to slay. Having said that, we need also to differentiate between what are economic enablers and what government's profits out of. By the way, no government is in the business of making profits. They are in the business of looking at how does our good friend here, who has a company or who is doing some element of development or is starting a small manufacturing plant, how is he able to take his goods to some of our biggest trading partners, which are here regionally, Uganda, Tanzania, you know, and the likes. How is he able to commute between these countries and move efficiently and quickly such that he's struck because the road is messed up or because the rail has been uprooted? How is he able to move his container quickly from Mombasa and it's in Malaba before, you know, before midnight? That is the idea behind these major upticks. It is not for the government to again use that rail to do business. No, it is for me and you to come and say, hey, guess what? The government has put up an infrastructure here that we need to use. We need to ensure that we are able to move these things. I gave you an example some time back, I think even a year ago, about the buses to Mandera. You remember? Mm-hmm. I told you, back in the day, you only had one bus, I think, per week that used to ply that route. But when the road was built, it moved from one bus a week to 8 buses a day. Why? Those buses were not owned by the government. It is businessmen who sat and said, guess what? Now we have a good road. And I know we have so many clients who can use that route. Why don't we invest?
I want to jump in there.
How you make
I want to jump in there right before we get to, you know, counties and just speak to the SGR issue because
yes.
it's one that we've been speaking about for a while.
Yes.
Because if this is the magnificent economic enabler that you say it is,
yes.
that the government thinks it is,
yes.
why did the East African partners pull out of this particular discussion? Why were the transporters still insistent on using, you know, road, protesting on that? Why did the government have to put it, to make it mandatory for them to use this service? Because economically, if you leave it to market forces,
yes.
if it makes more sense to use the rail, you don't have to force people. In fact, the problem would be there's too much cargo, we need to
yes.
limit it, but now you're forcing people. Clearly,
yes.
in your business thinking, there was a problem.
Tell you what. You know, we still have a lot of cargo that comes to the port of Mombasa. You know that, right? And it's supposed to be plied all over. It's supposed to be, I mean, the last mile, you know. The question we should be asking is, why haven't we not, or why didn't we make it mandatory a long time ago so that we can save our roads? You know, there's something we are saving. You know that? Mm-hmm. If we use the SGR, that means our roads, like the Mombasa Highway, will have some reprieve. It is actually very expensive in repairing that road. Why can we not then use this facility, all right, rail, which is safer, all right, which is more efficient than the road, and we leave our roads for light loads. Okay? That is the mentality we should have. It is for this reason that you find so many cartels who don't want to use the rail because they own trucks. Right? So they were saying, hey, and actually you remember, there was a lot of civil unrest in Mombasa when it became that SGR would be permanent. By the way, the SGR is used primarily for goods, okay, in the entire world. If you do the research on SGR, you will see it is the one that they do the double stack containers. That is what this rail should be doing. Transport should just be flowing. It is for people to understand that we can use this road and save our roads. Okay. So with time, it will make sense, Jeff. Trust me.
I'll hold you to this. We'll have this conversation
please do.
in a couple of years
because
from now.
with time, Jeff, it will make sense. My only problem, and I still go back to, it is the kind of theft and the kind of corruption that we have seen, even in the SGR. You saw the premium that people are getting paid on land that they never used. So, you know, is it time we look at at how government acquires land? Should there be a ballpark of buying that land? Because it was way escalated.
I want us to move it forward slightly on this, and even as we do that, we have some feedback as well concerning our question of the day. Of course, you can send it via WhatsApp at this particular point in time. Let's have it up on screen, please. Even though the government has put in place a number of anti-money laundering initiatives, including setting up an anti-narcotics police unit and drafting an anti-money laundering bill, neither the government nor Kenyan legislators appear keen to utilize these initiatives. The business community too does not support hard measures against money laundering for fear that a failure to clearly identify which activities constitute money laundering may hurt activities through restrictions on the free flow of domestic and international capital through the economy. That's Rogers Opande from Asumbi. Okay, let's continue this conversation right here. And even as we get to the tail end of this, Ed, because clearly everyone is talking about corruption and how we borrow the money, but very little of it is used for what it's intended on. Let's talk about what's happening right now. We have a clear case of COVID-19, millionaires, billionaires, however you want to put it, but still, we are still having a tough time getting around to who are the directors, how this took place. And this is an act happening in real time. You don't need to go back a couple of years to find out who was the auditor. What's our problem with fighting graft? Is it political goodwill?
It's not even political goodwill. It's just that our sense of undertaking national projects that are supposed to be of public good has been distorted by this whole issue of private gain. I'd like to bring the conversation of corruption to a more personal level. The fact that there is a level of impunity that has been tolerated over time, and the fact that you can get away with it, from, as early as the 60s up to now, it has made it such a way that garnering and competing for public office, because you will now get the incentive to be protected, is so high. And that's why you will sit on a coffee table with your friend, your classmate, who you went to school with, your brother, your cousin, and you'll not be able to call them out. You won't be able to call them out. Most likely, they will even tell you to open a company for them that they can use for this. So for me, it's at that personal level that no one, at a very personal level, at the family table, at the family tradition, at the family gathering in Christmas, calls out one of their own in terms of corruption and says, you looted from the government. We cannot call out. Instead, we are celebrating. If you look at all the corruption cases that have been there, the NYS scandal, be it, the Triton oil in the time past, all those things, you will find a very interesting dimension. These are companies, proxy companies, owned by friends or relatives. And no one is speaking out at that family level. And because of that, even when you go towards now at the national level to prosecute some of these issues, you end up into this maze of who is connected to who is calling who is intimidating which judge, who is intimidating which police officer investigating a case, and you will not be able to make it. So I want to say that at the level of us as a country reflecting deeply, we have to understand corruption is not coming from outside. We are part and parcel of the enabling infrastructure for corruption. All of us.
Right.
It's your cousin, it's your friend, it's your relative who is actually sitting on that procurement table and actually authenticating those documents as false and actually approving payments. Who is making all those bank transactions? It is someone we know, but we can't call them out. If we cannot stand up at a personal level and say, you know what, you're my brother, but I'm telling you, this deal is going to land you in problems and you're stealing from the country. We will not, however commissions we can make even 10 EACCs, we can make even special divisions, they will not go. And you can look at actually countries which have actually had this issue of organized crime, sophisticated crime. It starts from a personal level to call out people. If we cannot master that kind of grace to actually call people out, then as a country we'll just be doing cosmetic, because even the sentences we'll give, someone will go back to court, get another judge to overturn that sentence, get a lower fine, and now we'll come and celebrate the person. Even that person who has stolen and has been convicted and goes to prison, he comes back and does what? A church function to thank God for him being saved, from the conviction. He doesn't have the guilt of saying, here, I looted from the country. Right. So I think for me, I'm speaking to that national conscience and saying, if we sit at a personal level and cannot call each other out, forget about the government fighting corruption.
How do you live? Yesterday was International Anti-Corruption Day.
Yeah, we didn't celebrate
Here
it.
we are.
We couldn't celebrate that. Now, you see, Jeff, I've actually said this not once, not twice. I think the reason as to why we continue engaging in these fights, it's not because we do not have a strong penal code in this country, no. You have people in prison who've gone and who are still serving serious prison times for things that they have done, which were actually less than some of the corruption deals that have gone on in this country. So the reason why people are so comfortable in becoming corrupt and continuing to engrave that vice in society is because of one thing and one thing only, because they can get away with it. Mm-hmm. They understand the system, they understand who to go to. I mean, some was just the other day when the former Chief Justice, Willie Mutunga, told us that we have a bandit economy. You know what he was trying to say? That every money that you have, Jeff, has a history. And that's the truth about money. Money has a history. Today, if you pull a business mogul like Bill Gates and you ask him, how did you make your money? He will tell you historically how he made his money. If you pull somebody like Warren Buffett, ask him how did you do, he will show you money has a history. Jack Ma will tell you, this is how I made my money, starting from where I was, getting employed to do manual work. This is how I started. This is how I became a millionaire. Here, nobody tells you how they've been able to earn their money. As a matter of fact, this is a country where sometimes the simple narratives of how commerce work ceases to act when you start doing some businesses in this country. Money comes at the speed of your logic, not the basis of supply and demand. It is how faster you think, that's how faster you get money. The underlying thing is that we have just allowed corruption to continue moving around society, not because we don't have laws, not because we don't have people of goodwill, but because people have realized they can get away with it. Okay. We are still talking about COVID billion, the KEMSA. We're talking about COVID billionaires. Have you seen anybody something? We are still talking about NYS, who has been jailed. Yet, we had something called Chicken Gate in the UK, which happened, and some of the people were in this country, they have actually not gone anywhere. But in the UK, people served jail times, prison times, and they got out.
So you leave it as we think about that. Quite a way to end the show on this one. And of course, the conversation continues online on this one. You can still get me at I am Jeff Mote or at K24 TV on this. How do you move forward with an economy that really is pushed to the corner in terms of COVID-19, but also in terms of debt and, as they said, corruption as well? Personal solutions to these problems, because as Edward put it, really, when it comes to corruption, it's within your family. You know these people. Conversation continues online, but that's where we draw the curtains on this particular segment of the show. Edward Munyonyi, thank you so much for making time this morning. Gabriel Muthuma, thank you so much for making time as well to be on the show. Asanteni sana. Take a short break. We're back on the other side as we get interactive. Good morning.